everyone, I'm Giuseppe De Rosa, and I'm at Alpha Forni for this episode of Beyond Doughs, which will take you into the world of high hydration doughs. A higher level of bread making, pizza in particular, since that's what we're talking about, in which we'll see how to differentiate ourselves a bit from the traditional direct fermentation dough. We will be working through two types of pre-ferments in this process. One is a solid pre-ferment and the other is a liquid pre-ferment. The liquid pre-ferment, which is known as the POOLISH, and a 50% biga, which is a type of solid pre-ferment, will both be used. Both of these pre-ferments will ultimately lead us to the same result, which is a dough with a high level of hydration, specifically at 80%. We will follow step by step the various steps that will be necessary, starting from the preparation of the pre-ferment to the refreshment up to the creation of the pizza dough balls. Today we will see a dough with a liquid pre-ferment, the POOLISH, which I prepared yesterday, as well as a biga. What does liquid pre-ferment mean? That in this case we have equal amounts of water and flour. In this container we have 500 grams of flour and 500 grams of water, with clearly a yeast starter of around 2G, 3G, since yesterday it has been fermenting at room temperature. Here instead we use the biga method, where we have the same 500 grams of flour but with 50% water, so 250 grams of water, and the same 2.5 2G, I would say, of fresh brewer's yeast. Two pre-doughs that at the end of the refreshment process, as we will see, will ultimately lead us to an extremely well-hydrated dough ball, which is certainly more complicated and challenging to manage for a beginner compared to a dough made with direct fermentation, simply because it is much wetter. Once we have finished the refreshment process, which we will do using the mixer that is located right behind me, we will then need to allow the dough to rest. This resting period should take place at room temperature, and it will last for approximately a couple of hours, which is generally enough time for the dough to develop the proper texture and flavor. After this resting time, we can proceed to the next step, which is processing the dough for stretching, and then, as a consequence, we will move on to the baking stage. So we will try to give a fairly linear path in these various episodes that we are recording. Let's start. Come on. Let's see how to start one of the two pre-doughs, the liquid one, the POOLISH. But do you know why it's called POOLISH? Poland? Anyway, from history. Here we have half a kilo of flour, an equal amount of water, and a couple of grams of yeast. Fresh brewer's yeast, or 1 gram if you're using the dehydrated kind. Then this incredible technological tool that I'm sure, you might say, if you don't have one of these, even a fork is perfectly fine, but this one is cooler. Let's go ahead without any trouble and dissolve our 2 grams of yeast in the water. And then I'll add it without making anything up. Look, that's all there is to it. Complicated, huh? Let's just say that making a POOLISH is really a piece of cake. It's super easy. I'm gonna stir. What will I get? A sort of creamy mixture. The operation is already almost finished. I'd say we're all set. This is the consistency we want. Right now, of course, it's just water and flour. It's a cream. We're going to cover it. We'll seal it hermetically. And we'll keep it for at least 10 hours. But anyway, let's do something smart. You take a little marker, you mark the level, and when it has risen by at least 30%, 50% is even better. We don't expect the POOLISH to double, okay? This isn't a dough, it's still a ferment, but when it has risen by at least 30%, it means it's ready for the refreshment. Usually it takes at least 10 hours. Also, because if we're in a hurry, we'd add more yeast. Nothing bad will happen, okay? We'll have a pizza that's a little heavier, but oh well, come on, it's acceptable. This is according to the criteria for doing it really, really well. And then we'll come back to it and see it in the next phase. Maybe we'll change the container. We'll put it in a slightly taller one. We'll see. All right, let's continue starting with our liquid pre-dough, the POOLISH. So here we have the 500 grams of flour plus the 500 grams of water that we prepared yesterday, obviously combined with a starter of around 2 grams of yeast. To be honest, I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it's around there. Another 500 grams of flour, okay? In both cases, we're using a flour with more or less the same protein value, around 13%, so it's always a medium strength flour. We need 300 grams of water, specifically cold water. While the temperature was not important in the first phase, at this stage, the temperature now plays a particularly crucial role in helping the dough to fully and properly absorb the water. In this case, another 2 to 3 grams, more or less, will be used. What's missing? The salt, of course. Usually about 20 grams of salt is fine for this recipe, which is roughly equivalent to a spoonful per kilo of flour. This amount is generally considered appropriate, but you can adjust slightly to taste if you prefer. Some people actually add a bit more, also to extend what's called the shelf life. But, well, in my opinion, you end up losing the real flavor. So in my opinion, 20 grams, maybe 25, but 20 is good. One last thing, what pizza makers don't tell you. Extras are rarely talked about in detail, or to put it another way, it's often considered better not to talk about them at all. Well, for one example, there's olive oil, which is generally not a problem. Because maybe we prefer a result that's a bit more refined, with a slightly more particular and distinctive crunch to it. I personally don't use it, but it's really a personal choice whether or not to add these extras, depending on your own preferences and tastes. 15 grams of olive oil. But then there's the so-called dough improvers. This is a whole other world. It can really open up situations where you see some pizza makers say, I don't use them, and others say, I do. In the end nowadays, well, it's also wrong to hide it because you're not doing anything wrong. We're still talking about natural products. Improvers can be a malt with high diastatic power or using, in the end, their amylases, their proteins, nothing too complex. Why are they added? Because when we like to have that big puffy crust, you know, that particularly pronounced open crumb, they help out. That's all there is to it. But enough talk, let's get started. To begin, we should take our total kilo of ingredients and get them ready for mixing. Let's immediately put the full amount into the mixer, which means adding 500 grams of one ingredient and another 500 grams of the other. Try to be as precise as possible, even if you are just a few grams over or under. This careful measurement will help ensure the best results as we move forward. Excuse my back for a moment, but the situation here isn't exactly the easiest to manage. Also, that's partly because I have to be careful with what I'm doing right now. We can see that its gluten network is already formed. I don't know if you can see it, but even though it hasn't been worked or kneaded or anything yet, we already have a structure forming. Step 1 done. Actually, let's get this container out of the way. 2. The flour. So if I were to add just the flour as the first ingredient and start the machine, what would I get? An extremely hard dough. And I'm going to gradually add these 300 grams of water slowly. If you don't have a professional mixer, it will be a bit more complicated. With a planetary mixer, it's already doable. By hand, you need time, meaning you stop when you see the dough is a bit too relaxed, you stop everything and put it all in the fridge. You give it time for autolysis, that's what it's called. It's a process that allows the gluten network to structure itself naturally, chemically, and then you add more. But in this case, since we have a spiral mixer, life is a bit simpler for us. Let's go straight in with the flour, as I explained. This time it's easier. Boom. And so now what do we have? A kilo of flour and 500 grams of water in there with a little bit of yeast. I'm going to immediately place my 2 additional grams of yeast in there. And the secret ingredient. But guys, very little, okay? If you don't have malt with high diastatic power, you can use a bit of malt. I'm not telling you to use sugar because it's not good, but don't use anything otherwise, okay? Either you buy the right one or just leave it out. I might have put in maybe 3 or 4 grams, but not even that much. Now I'll close the lid and start the machine. Without even stopping it, I'm going to carefully pour it in with this cold water slowly from the fridge. You could also use ice cubes if you want, as many people do. And I start to put a little in every time. This is my method, of course. Everyone does as they please. Every time I go to add water, I slightly increase the mixing speed. Some people keep it constant, some work at high speeds. Guys, everyone develops their own methodology. You just need to understand the logic behind it, what the pre-dough is, how you then get to a high hydration dough. And the method then follows the situation, the status, the environment. So if I have a machine like this, I decide freely, everyone should do their own thing. So I've increased it a little. What we see already, I don't know if I'm making myself clear, is a practically dehydrated situation. Let's be clear, the water should be added in a thin stream. In other words, we start adding the water and we wait for the added water to be completely absorbed. When we see the bottom is clearly free of water, then we continue. We always continue, paying close attention. And then here I have a whole series of elements that work in my favor. The fact of having a rotating bowl is a real game changer. The fact of having a speed that can reach up to 300 RPM is another thing that's not to be underestimated. There are many reasons why a spiral mixer is considered the best for pizza dough. Okay, we have almost all the water in there, almost. We have less than 100 ml left. This is the most complicated part, you know, when you get to high hydration. So at this point, I'm going in with the salt, which helps me a bit just to debunk this myth about salt first, salt later. You add the salt whenever you want. I'm putting it in now, all of it, and it will help with the absorption of the last bit of water, which is the most complicated part. Okay. I'll increase the speed just a little bit more. I'm currently at about 250 revolutions per minute right now. I'm adding this last part drop by drop, and each time I make sure there's no more water at the bottom of the mixer. Or if we're making dough by hand, we stop everything and put it in the fridge. If we're using a planetary mixer, we also put the bowl in the fridge with the hook, because this last part here is what could ruin all the work we've done so far. It would be a shame. I increase it. I'll basically be reaching the maximum possible speed right at the very end of this process. Just as I finish, the dough is still nicely closed. The dough, the shape you saw, last part. I lower the speed just a little bit. Now is the most complicated part, and it will be for the biga too, of course. At this moment, the person making the dough has their eyes glued to the mixer. If you have your phone, you need to turn it off because you can't get distracted now, because this is the most complicated part. If the dough has closed up again, yeah, we see that it had opened up completely before. Now it has closed back up. And we're missing the last little bit of water, these last 30 grams, and we'll see the effect it has. It will probably open up completely and then close back up. Boom, all in. Now that the dough has closed back up, how long should we wait? It depends. I personally wait for about 3, 4, up to 6 minutes. After that, actually, I'll start slowing down the machine right now. Because the dough is closed, the gluten network is formed. Actually, we can even see it. See how beautiful it is? It's like velvet. It's perfect. Perfect. Another technique. We let it rest for a minute so it settles. Then we give it another minute in the mixer, but not slowly. And then we take it out onto this counter and see if we like it or not. Here we are. So we've placed a stainless steel surface, in this case stainless steel, to fold our high hydration dough, our POOLISH. If you don't have a steel surface, marble is fine, a marble table, anything that, you know, a surface that won't cause any problems. It must be extremely smooth. The first thing I'm going to do is put, like this, a drop of oil to make my life easier later on. The only steps left now are the final mixing of the dough. Remember, I think not even a minute, about 15 seconds will be enough because it's absolutely perfect. Then we'll take it out and put it on the counter. We're going to increase the speed a bit and then go straight to the counter. I'd say we're all set. Here we are. And we've got it. And we're good to go. Now we're going to do some folds. Actually, you can do two types of operations. Either what I'm doing, the fold, or you can do lamination. In the end, it's more or less the same thing. Lamination is stretching it out, then bringing it back in, but we'll do whichever we prefer. Okay, our POOLISH, which we have here with an 80% hydration level, it looks really good. It tastes good too. What do we do now? We're going to cover it for a moment, just for a short while. Just 10 minutes. And then we'll go and portion it out, which will be ready for baking in about 2 to 3 hours. Okay? All right. On our steel surface, after about 10 minutes of rest, we have this beautiful 80% hydration POOLISH. So I've prepared a scale, which is a tool used for measuring weight, and I'm going to demonstrate how it works for you. Weigh out my portions. Look how nice and liquid the dough is. Very, very nice. About 280 or less, it depends. Let's say we want to make some nice big pizzas. A little too much. Last one up. There we go. So from our 1 kilo of flour, we've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 portions. It's very sticky right now, as you can see. We need to add just a little bit of oil. Make sure to get some oil on both your hands and the counter. Not too much, but a little is fine. Now, there are various types of closing techniques, but this is a high hydration dough. So it's not like we can close it in our hands, we'd make a mess. We have to work on the table, on the counter. And as soon as we have, let's say, a fairly uniform surface, we're going to use the perlatura technique. Perlatura is simply the act of closing it underneath, just like this. Without doing that, see, I can go like this or like this. It's really just a matter of tucking it under, as you can observe here. But the point is that this little ball has to be nicely closed. So I started here where I had a little bit of oil, then I moved here where the situation is instead dried. It's, how do you say it? It's dry, thanks to the director for the suggestion. And now it's become nice and smooth. Now we'll place this in the proofing box. We'll let it sit for 2 hours, 3 anyway, until it doubles in size more or less at room temperature. After that, we'll stretch it out. You'll see that stretching it is also much more complicated than with a traditional dough. In fact, there are some tricks that we'll look at together. I'm going to do this fold, a relative stretch, so going slowly, and then I move to the slightly dehydrated part, the dry part, as the director says, and I immediately get my shape. It's a bit more complicated than it looks. You honestly have to spend some time on it, because closing a pizza ball with a hydration, let's say up to 68 to 70%, is definitely easier to handle. You need to get some practice in, guys. It's important to keep practicing because that's how you'll improve. So don't give up, even if it feels tough or you make mistakes. Keep going, keep trying, and keep working at it until you get the right result. And when you see that your hands are a disaster, when things just aren't working out, remember that this is all part of learning. Try again. Not always. Then there are the natural talents who somehow just do it, boom, right away. But it took me a while. You know, I have to be honest. Boom, just like that. We have our 6 delicious pizza portions all ready and prepared for the final phase of our process. But now, I'll give you a moment's break. Because right now we're about to move on to the next important step, which is working with the biga, the pre-fermented dough starter.